"He looks like Daddy," Alien Princess said when she saw the human janitor. The widowed Empress froze. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the grand halls of the celestial palace of Valkyrin, the gleaming heart of the galactic Concordat, a lone human janitor pushed his cart through corridors adorned with treasures from 1,000 worlds. His name was Ethan Cole, and he was nothing special, just one of the few humans permitted to work in the hallowed halls of galactic power. Ethan kept his head down as he worked, maneuvering around the elegant forms of the Valkyrin royal guards. Their sleek, alabaster exoskeletons reflected the ambient light as they stood rigidly at attention, six-fingered hands clasped around ceremonial energy staves. In their presence, Ethan was keenly aware of his comparatively diminutive stature and dull appearance. The Valkyrin were the undisputed masters of the known galaxy. Tall, graceful beings with pearlescent skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light, they had evolved on a world bathed in the glow of 3 suns. Their civilization had mastered interstellar travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture, and they had spent millennia cultivating an empire built on complex political alliances and technological superiority. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, discovered just 40 Earth years ago when a Valkyrin scout ship detected unusual energy signatures from a previously ignored star system. The Valkyrin had been simultaneously fascinated and horrified by humanity, a species that had advanced so quickly despite their chaotic social structures and violent tendencies. Humans were permitted to join the Concordat, but only under strict supervision, relegated to the lowest positions in the galactic hierarchy, which was how Ethan, former maintenance engineer on the International Space Station, found himself pushing a cleaning cart through the Imperial Palace. After the Earth's incorporation into the Concordat, many humans with specialized skills found their expertise suddenly obsolete in the face of Valkyrin technology. Ethan had been grateful to find any work at all, even if it meant scrubbing floors that were already spotless thanks to self-cleaning nanobots. As he rounded a corner, Ethan nearly collided with a procession of Valkyrin nobles. He immediately pressed himself against the wall, eyes downcast as protocol demanded. The nobles barely spared him a glance as they glided past, their elaborate robes of living crystal tinkling melodiously with each step. Once they had passed, Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. 7 years of working in the palace, and he still felt like an interloper about to be discovered. He resumed pushing his cart, heading toward the residential wing that housed visiting dignitaries. The Empress herself had quarters there, though Ethan had never seen her. Rumor had it that she rarely left her chambers since the death of the Emperor 3 years ago. As he approached the grand entrance to the diplomatic suites, Ethan noticed unusual activity. Royal guards stood at heightened alert, their normally placid expressions tense. Through the massive doors, he could see attendants rushing about, their movements uncharacteristically hurried for the typically serene Valkyrin. One of the junior attendants, a young Valkyrin named Thelian who had always been a bit more friendly toward humans than his peers, noticed Ethan hesitating at the entrance. "You might want to avoid this area today, human," Thelian said, his voice carrying the musical quality that all Valkyrin speech possessed. "The Empress is making a rare appearance. The young Princess Lyra has returned from her education journey." Ethan nodded his thanks. The last thing he needed was to stumble into an imperial ceremony. He began to back away, intending to find another route to his assigned cleaning sector, when a commotion erupted from within the diplomatic wing. The sound of a child's laughter, bright and unrestrained in a way that Valkyrin adults never were, echoed through the hall. Before Ethan could retreat further, a small figure came bounding through the doorway, pursued by flustered attendants. It was a Valkyrin child, no more than the equivalent of a 6-year-old human. Her skin held the opalescent sheen of all her kind, but unlike the adults with their carefully controlled movements, she ran with the abandoned joy universal to children across the galaxy. Her eyes, wide and brilliantly violet, fixed on Ethan with undisguised curiosity. And then she stopped, mere feet away from him, her expression transforming from delight to something more complex. She tilted her head, examining him with the intense focus only children can muster. "He looks like Daddy," the little princess said in perfect, unaccented English, pointing directly at Ethan. A collective gasp rose from the gathered Valkyrie attendants. Ethan stood frozen, not comprehending. The Emperor had been a Valkyrie of the highest bloodline, nearly 7 feet tall, with the characteristic pearlescent skin and elegant features of his species. He looked nothing like a stocky human janitor. Before anyone could react further, the crowd of attendants parted like a sea, and a figure stepped forward that made Ethan's breath catch in his throat. The widowed Empress Selene, ruler of the Galactic Concordat, stood before him. In person, she was even more striking than her images that were displayed across 1,000 worlds. Her skin seemed to capture and refract light, creating a subtle aurora effect around her tall, willowy frame. Her eyes, a deep violet like her daughter's, were fixed on Ethan with an intensity that made him want to sink into the floor. And she was frozen in place, her normally composed features caught in an expression of absolute shock. "Empress, forgive the human's presence," one of the senior attendants began, moving to intercept the princess who was still staring at Ethan with fascination. The Empress raised a hand, silencing the attendant instantly. Her gaze never left Ethan's face. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried throughout the suddenly silent hall. "Leave us," she commanded. "All of you except the human and my daughter." The attendants hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the direct order of their Empress. "Now," she added, with a soft finality that brooked no argument. The Valkyrie attendants and guards withdrew with remarkable speed, leaving Ethan alone with the 2 most important figures in the galaxy. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Had he violated some obscure protocol? Was he about to become an example of what happens to humans who overstep their boundaries? The princess, seemingly oblivious to the tension, approached Ethan with the fearless curiosity of childhood. She reached up, and before he could react, touched his beard with delicate fingers. "See, mother? His face has fur like Daddy's did in the old pictures," she said, still speaking English rather than the lyrical Valkyrie language. The Empress seemed to collect herself, her regal bearing returning as she glided forward. Up close, Ethan could see fine lines of strain around her eyes, subtle indicators of grief that her perfect composure couldn't quite conceal. "What is your name, human?" she asked, her voice now controlled and neutral. "Ethan Cole, your radiance," he replied, remembering to use the proper honorific. "I'm a maintenance worker assigned to the diplomatic wing." "Look at me, Ethan Cole," the Empress commanded. Reluctantly, Ethan raised his eyes to meet hers. It was considered presumptuous for lower species to make direct eye contact with Valkyrie royalty, but he could hardly refuse a direct order from the Empress herself. Her gaze was penetrating, as though she were looking into his very soul. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, she spoke again. "You will come with us." It wasn't a request. The Empress turned, lifting her daughter into her arms, and began walking deeper into the diplomatic wing. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan followed, leaving his cleaning cart abandoned in the hall. They proceeded through a series of increasingly ornate chambers, each more magnificent than the last. Finally, they entered what appeared to be private quarters, still grand by human standards, but more intimate than the public spaces of the palace. The Empress set her daughter down and gestured toward a sitting area. "Lyra, go to your meditation room. I need to speak with this human alone." The princess pouted but obeyed, casting one last curious glance at Ethan before disappearing through a side door. When they were alone, the Empress turned to face him again. "Sit," she said, indicating a chair that was clearly not designed for human proportions. Ethan perched awkwardly on the edge of the seat, his heart hammering in his chest. The Empress remained standing, looming over him in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. "I have questions that you will answer truthfully," she stated. "Your future depends on it." Ethan nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. Have you ever had contact with the imperial family before today? No, Your Radiance. Never. Have you ever accessed restricted information about the royal lineage or imperial history? No, Your Radiance. She studied him silently, her expression unreadable. Then, in a movement so swift Ethan barely registered it, she pressed a small device to his temple. He felt a brief tingling sensation. Truth verified, she murmured, almost to herself. She set the device aside and, to Ethan's surprise, took a seat across from him. Do you know anything about the Emperor's appearance before his ascension? She asked, her tone subtly different, less imperial and more personal. Only what's common knowledge, Your Radiance. That he was considered exceptionally handsome, even by Valkyran standards. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Common knowledge can be carefully constructed, Ethan Cole. She reached for a pendant around her neck, touching it lightly. A holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed a younger version of the Empress standing beside a figure that made Ethan's jaw drop. The being in the image was unmistakably Valkyran in its overall physiology, but its features were different from any Valkyran Ethan had ever seen. Its face was broader, its frame more solid. And most shockingly, it had facial hair, a short, neatly trimmed beard that no pure Valkyran could grow. This was my husband, Emperor Talon, before the genetic modifications required for his ascension to the throne, the Empress said quietly. He was half human. Ethan stared at the image, unable to process what he was hearing. It was impossible. The imperial bloodline was the purest in the galaxy, carefully maintained through millennia of selective breeding. That's not possible, he finally managed to say, forgetting protocol in his shock. Not only possible, but true, the Empress replied. Though it is the most closely guarded secret in the Concordat. A secret known only to the highest levels of the Council of Elders and the Imperial Physicians. She deactivated the hologram and fixed Ethan with those penetrating violet eyes. And now to you. But how? Ethan asked, his mind still reeling. The Empress leaned back, her posture relaxing slightly. The Valkyran discovered Earth long before the official first contact 40 years ago. We had been observing humanity for nearly a century before that. My husband's grandmother was a xenobiologist studying human biology. She became fascinated by a human male she was observing. Inappropriately so. Ethan felt his face flush at the implication. The result of their union was kept secret, the child raised as a pure Valkyran. When genetic testing revealed the truth, it should have meant disgrace for the entire family line. But by then, the child, Talon's father, had already shown exceptional abilities. The council made a decision to keep the human ancestry hidden, to see what would come of this genetic experiment. She paused, her gaze distant. What came of it was Talon, the most brilliant military strategist and diplomat the Concordat had ever seen. When he came of age for consideration to the imperial succession, the council was faced with a dilemma. His achievements made him the clear choice for emperor, but his hybrid genetics made him technically ineligible. So they changed him, Ethan said, beginning to understand. Yes, extensive genetic modification to emphasize his Valkyran traits and suppress the human ones. Physical alterations, a complete rewriting of his early history. By the time he took the throne, no one could have guessed his true heritage. Her voice had grown soft with memory. But the modifications were never perfect. They required constant maintenance. And eventually, they failed. Ethan ventured when she didn't continue. The Empress's eyes refocused on him. The official story is that Emperor Talon died of a rare neurological condition. The truth is that his body began rejecting the genetic modifications. The treatments became increasingly painful until he could no longer endure them. He chose to let nature take its course rather than continue suffering. She stood suddenly, moving to a window that overlooked the capital city sprawling beneath the palace. Before he died, he made me promise something. He said that one day, when our daughter was old enough to understand, I would tell her the truth about her heritage, that she is 1/4 human. Ethan sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the implications. The princess of the Galactic Concordat, heir to the imperial throne, carried human blood. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. "Why trust me with a secret of this magnitude?" The Empress turned back to face him. "Because my daughter recognized something in you that reminds her of her father. Children sometimes see truths that adults miss. And because I need someone who understands human genetics." "I'm just a janitor," Ethan protested. "I worked on the ISS as a maintenance engineer before coming here. I don't know anything about genetics." "But you were also part of the human delegation that first negotiated with the Concordat after official first contact," the Empress replied, surprising him with her knowledge of his past. "Before you were reassigned." Ethan stiffened. His reassignment had been a diplomatic way of removing him from a position of any influence after he had vocally objected to the terms being imposed on humanity. "You have been watched, Ethan Cole. Your file indicates intelligence, integrity, and a certain, stubborn loyalty to your species. Qualities my husband would have appreciated." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Qualities I need now." "For what purpose, Your Radiance?" The Council of Elders grows increasingly xenophobic. They see the rapid advancement of humanity as a threat. There are factions pushing for more restrictive policies, even considering rescinding Earth's membership in the Concordat altogether. Her expression hardened. "And if they ever discovered the truth about my daughter's heritage, they would deem her unfit to rule. The imperial line would pass to a cousin dynasty that shares these xenophobic views." She placed a hand on the arm of Ethan's chair, leaning down until her face was level with his. "I need an ally who understands both worlds. Someone who can help me prepare my daughter for the challenges ahead, who can advise me on human matters, and who has a personal stake in improving relations between our species." Ethan's mind raced. What she was proposing sounded dangerously close to treason against the Council. And yet, the implications for Earth, for all of humanity, were staggering. "What exactly would this role entail?" he asked cautiously. "Officially, you would be reassigned as a cultural advisor to the princess. Unofficially, you would be my eyes and ears among the human population within the Concordat. You would help me identify potential allies for the reforms I wish to implement once my daughter takes the throne. And if I refuse?" The Empress straightened, her expression cooling. "Then you will be relocated to a position far from the palace, with altered memories of this conversation. I cannot risk this information spreading." It wasn't really a choice, Ethan realized. And yet, even if it had been, he suspected he would have made the same decision. The opportunity to improve humanity's standing in the galaxy was too important to pass up. "I accept, Your Radiance." A look of genuine relief passed across her face. "Good. We begin immediately. There is much to prepare, and time may be shorter than we realize." As if on cue, the door to the princess's meditation room slid open, and Lyra bounded out, apparently having grown bored with solitude. "Can I talk to him now, Mother?" she asked eagerly, pointing at Ethan. The Empress nodded, a gentle smile transforming her severe features. "Yes, my star. This is Ethan. He will be your new cultural advisor. He's going to teach you about Earth and humans." The princess clapped her hands in delight and rushed over to Ethan. "Do humans really only have 5 fingers? And is it true you can't see in the dark at all? And why do some of you have fur on your faces, but not others?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Ethan couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "That's a lot of questions, Your Highness. Which would you like me to answer first?" As he began explaining the basics of human biology to the enthralled princess, Ethan caught the Empress watching them with an unreadable expression. In that moment, he realized his life had changed irrevocably. He had been drawn into the highest echelons of imperial politics, entrusted with a secret that could reshape the galaxy. And all because a little girl had said 5 words. "He looks like Daddy." 2 months later, Ethan found himself in a position he could never have imagined. His days were spent in the imperial family's private quarters, teaching Princess Lyra about Earth culture and history, while his evenings were dedicated to clandestine meetings with the Empress, discussing the complex politics of the Concordat. The transition had not been smooth. When Ethan's promotion was announced, It had caused a stir among both the Valkyrian court and the human workers in the palace. Humans whispered that he must have uncovered some scandalous secret to blackmail his way into such a position. Valkyrian nobles were openly disdainful, viewing his appointment as yet another of the Empress's eccentricities since her period of mourning had ended. Only Thelion, the young Valkyrian attendant who had warned Ethan on that fateful day, seemed genuinely pleased by the development. He had been assigned as Ethan's liaison to the palace staff, helping him navigate the labyrinthine protocols of court life. The princess has never shown such interest in her studies before, Thelion remarked one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. The royal tutors are quite jealous of your influence. Ethan shrugged uncomfortably. He was still getting used to walking openly through areas of the palace that had previously been forbidden to him. She's just excited to learn about something new. The novelty will wear off. Thelion gave him a sideways glance. Perhaps she senses a connection to human culture that even she doesn't fully understand. Ethan kept his face carefully neutral. The Empress had made it clear that no one, not even those who seemed sympathetic to humans, could be trusted with the secret of the princess's heritage. Speaking of the princess, Thelion continued, there's a ritual celebration approaching, the Ascension Commemoration. It marks the anniversary of Emperor Talon's ascension to the throne. The princess will be expected to perform the ritual of remembrance. She hasn't mentioned it, Ethan said, frowning. Lyra usually chattered endlessly about upcoming events. It may be difficult for her, Thelion said delicately. It will be her first time participating since her father's death. The ritual involves connecting to the ancestral memory crystal, a device that contains the stored consciousness imprints of previous emperors, including her father. Ethan stopped walking. Stored consciousness. You mean the emperor's memories are preserved in this crystal? Thelion nodded. A simplified version, yes. Not the complete consciousness, but enough for limited interaction. It's how our rulers gain wisdom from their predecessors. He hesitated. The princess has been avoiding her preparation sessions. Perhaps you could encourage her? Ethan promised to try, but his mind was already racing with implications. If the emperor's consciousness was partially preserved in this crystal, what secrets might it contain? And more immediately concerning, would the crystal somehow reveal Lyra's human ancestry if she connected with it? That evening, when the princess had been put to bed, Ethan brought his concerns to the Empress in her private study. The memory crystal poses no danger, she assured him after listening to his worried explanation. Talon ensured that. The consciousness imprint he left was carefully edited to remove any trace of his human heritage. She rose from her desk and moved to a concealed panel in the wall. Pressing her palm against it, she revealed a small alcove containing a crystal that glowed with an inner blue light. This is a private memory crystal, separate from the ancestral one used in public rituals. This contains Talon's true memories, unaltered. She carefully lifted it from its setting. He created this for Lyra, to be given to her when she comes of age, so that she might know her father as he truly was, not as the Empire required him to be. Ethan stared at the crystal, mesmerized by its pulsing light. That level of planning. He must have known he was dying long before it happened. He did, the Empress confirmed, her voice tight with old grief. But few others did, which is why the Council's recent actions concern me. She returned the crystal to its hiding place and sealed the panel before continuing. There have been unusual inquiries into the Imperial medical records, specifically into Talon's treatment protocols before his death. The official explanation is a review of procedures to prevent similar tragedies, but the timing is suspicious. You think someone suspects the truth about his heritage? I think someone is searching for leverage, she replied. The Ascension Commemoration brings all major faction leaders together. It would be an opportune moment for a power play. Ethan considered this. Over the past weeks, he had received a crash course in Concordat politics from the Empress. The seemingly unified empire was actually a delicate balance of competing interests, noble houses, planetary governors, corporate guilds, and military branches, all vying for influence under the imperial umbrella. What can I do to help? He asked. Continue working with Lyra. She trusts you, and she'll need that trust to get through the ceremony. The Empress hesitated, then added, and there's one more task. One I can entrust to no one else. She removed a small data crystal from her desk drawer. This contains evidence of corruption within the Central Trade Guild, specifically, their exploitation of human labor colonies in the outer systems. I need this information delivered to Ambassador Chun of Earth. Ethan took the crystal with surprise. You're helping Earth build a case against the Guild? What? The Guild is aligned with the xenophobic factions. Weakening them serves my purposes. She gave him a measured look. And improving conditions for humans serves yours. Our interests align, Ethan Cole. He pocketed the crystal, understanding that this was another test of his loyalty, and perhaps the beginning of a more equal partnership. The next day, Ethan found Princess Lyra in her study alcove, deliberately ignoring the ritual preparation materials her tutors had left for her. I heard there's a big ceremony coming up, he said casually, sitting beside her. Something about connecting with your ancestors? Lyra's delicate features scrunched into a scowl. I don't want to do it. The crystal is scary. Scary how? Ethan asked gently. She drew her knees up to her chest, suddenly looking much younger than her years. What if my father doesn't recognize me? What if he's disappointed in me? What if, her voice dropped to a whisper, what if I do it wrong and everyone sees? Ethan recognized the universal fear of a child faced with public performance. But there was something more specific in her worry about her father not recognizing her. Did she, on some level, sense her difference from other Valkyran children? Your father loved you very much, Ethan said carefully. Nothing could change that. Not time, not distance, not even death. How do you know? She challenged. Ethan smiled. Because that's how love works. It doesn't just disappear. He hesitated, then added, and you know what? Sometimes being different isn't a bad thing. Sometimes it makes you stronger. Lyra looked at him curiously. Is that why humans are so strong? Because you're different from everyone else. We're not stronger, just adaptable, Ethan explained. Humans have always had to adapt to survive. It's our greatest strength. Like how you adapted to working in the palace even though the gravity is different and the air has more oxygen than you're used to. Ethan blinked in surprise. He hadn't realized she had noticed such details about human physiology. Exactly like that. I think I'm adaptable too, Lyra declared. Mother says I learn faster than other Valkyran children my age. Do you think that means I'm special? Very special, Ethan agreed, choosing his words carefully. And I think you'll do wonderfully at the ceremony. Want to practice together? Over the next week, Ethan helped Lyra prepare for the ritual, breaking down the ceremonial movements into simple steps and practicing the formal responses she would need to give. He was careful never to overstep his bounds. This was Valkyran culture. After all, not his to interpret, but he found ways to make the practice sessions engaging rather than intimidating. In the process, he learned more about Valkyran spirituality than most humans ever would. The ancestral memory crystals were central to their concept of continuity, not quite immortality, but a way of preserving wisdom across generations. Each ruler contributed their most important memories and insights before death, creating a living library of experience. When the day of the Ascension commemoration arrived, the palace was transformed. Luminescent banners hung from the soaring ceilings, and the air was filled with the delicate chiming of crystal wind sculptures, a sound that the Valkyran associated with transition between states of being. Ethan, dressed in formal attire provided by the Empress's staff, was permitted to watch from a secluded alcove near the imperial family's position. From this vantage point, he could observe the gathering of the Concordat's elite, representatives from hundreds of worlds, most of whom had never seen a human up close. The ceremony began with processions and speeches, ritual exchanges of vows between the major factions and the throne. Ethan paid close attention to the political undercurrents, noting which representatives seemed genuinely loyal to the Empress and which were merely going through the motions. Finally, it was time for the ritual of remembrance. Princess Lyra, resplendent in ceremonial robes that caught and refracted light with her every movement, approached the central dais where the ancestral memory crystal rested on a pedestal. The great hall fell silent as the princess raised her hands in the traditional gesture of supplication. Ethan held his breath, hoping their practice sessions had been enough. Lyra began the ritual perfectly, her clear voice reciting the ancient words of invocation. When she placed her hands on the crystal, it flared with blue-white light that enveloped her small form. Ethan could see her tense momentarily, then relax as the connection formed. The ritual called for the heir to share a brief moment with each of the three most recent emperors, asking for their blessing and wisdom. When she reached her father's imprint, the final and most personal connection, a ripple of emotion passed visibly through the assembly. The light surrounding Lyra shifted, taking on a warmer golden hue. Her face, previously solemn with concentration, broke into a sudden, radiant smile. "Father," she whispered, the sound somehow carrying throughout the hall despite its softness. The Empress, standing rigidly beside her throne, pressed a hand to her heart, her composure slipping for just a moment. The connection lasted longer than protocol dictated, but no one moved to interrupt. When the light finally faded and Lyra stepped back from the crystal, there wasn't a dry eye among even the most stoic Valkyrian nobles. Lyra completed the ritual with perfect precision, but it was that moment of genuine emotion that transformed what could have been a mere performance into something profound. As she returned to her mother's side, walking with the deliberate grace she had practiced so diligently, Ethan felt an unexpected surge of pride. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of diplomatic formalities. It was only later, at the reception that followed, that Ethan sensed something had changed. The Valkyr nobles, who had previously ignored his presence entirely, were now watching him with covert interest. Some even nodded acknowledgement as he passed, a courtesy never before extended to a human in the palace. Felion found him observing the proceedings from a relatively quiet corner. "You've become quite the topic of conversation," the young Valkyrian remarked, handing Ethan a glass of something that sparkled like liquid starlight. "Why?" Ethan asked, cautiously sipping the drink. It tasted like summer berries and champagne, with an undertone of something alien but not unpleasant. "The princess's performance was unexpected," Felion explained. "The depth of connection she achieved with the Emperor's imprint is rarely seen, even among full-grown heirs. And everyone knows you've been preparing her." He tilted his head curiously. "How did you manage it?" Ethan shrugged. "I just helped her not to be afraid." A simple answer to a complex question came a new voice, deep, resonant, and unmistakably hostile. Ethan turned to find himself facing a Valkyrian male he recognized from the Empress's briefings. Council Elder Vaxis, leader of the Traditionalist faction and one of the most outspoken critics of human inclusion in the Concordat. "Elder Vaxis," Felion said, bowing deeply. "An honor." The elder ignored him, his pale eyes fixed on Ethan. "So you are the human who has somehow insinuated himself into the imperial household. I've been curious to meet you." "The honor is mine, Elder," Ethan replied neutrally, giving the appropriate bow for a Valkyrian of Vaxis's rank. "Is it?" Vaxis's mouth curved in what might have been a smile on a human face, but on his held no warmth whatsoever. "I wonder what a human maintenance worker could possibly offer the heir to the Concordat. Unless, perhaps, there is more to your story than appears on the surface." Ethan maintained a calm expression, though his heart had begun to race. "I simply teach the princess about Earth culture, Elder. Her Radiance believes a well-rounded education includes understanding all species within the Concordat." "Indeed." Vaxis moved closer, lowering his voice. "A curious priority, given that humans represent less than 0.1% of the Concordat's population. Almost as curious as the Empress's decision to conduct private audiences with the Earth Ambassador 3 times in the past month." So Vaxis had been monitoring the Empress's movements. Ethan kept his expression neutral. "I wouldn't know about her Radiance's diplomatic schedule, Elder." "No." Vaxis raised an elegant eyebrow. Yet you were seen entering the Earth Embassy just yesterday. A cultural advisor making a diplomatic call. Ethan silently cursed himself for not being more careful when delivering the data crystal to Ambassador Chun. I was consulting with their Cultural Affairs office regarding educational materials for the princess, he replied smoothly. Standard procedure for my position. Vaxis studied him for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. Of course. How dedicated you are to your role. His tone made the words an insult rather than a compliment. I look forward to seeing what other innovations you bring to the princess's education. With that, he glided away, leaving Ethan with the distinct impression that he had just been threatened. That was unpleasant, Thelian murmured. Elder Vaxis rarely concerns himself with palace staff appointments. Unless they're human, Ethan replied grimly. Even then, Thelian looked troubled. Be careful, Ethan. The elder doesn't make idle inquiries. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the princess had been put to bed, still glowing with the success of her ritual, Ethan sought out the Empress in her private study. Elder Vaxis confronted me at the reception. He reported without preamble. He knows about my visit to the Earth Embassy. The Empress looked up from the documents she was reviewing, her expression grave. That is concerning. Vaxis has always opposed my policies regarding Earth, but direct surveillance of imperial activities crosses a line. He also mentioned your meetings with Ambassador Chun, which were conducted with the utmost discretion. She set aside her work, her brow furrowing. This suggests he has informants within my personal staff. Ethan hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him since his encounter with the elder. Could he know about the princess's heritage? If he did, he would have moved against us already. The Empress replied, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. No, I believe he suspects we are planning some policy change that would benefit Earth, which, in a sense, we are. She rose and began pacing, her gown shimmering with her agitated movements. The princess's connection with her father's imprint today, it was stronger than I anticipated. There was genuine recognition there. Is that unusual? Memory crystals preserve knowledge and personality, but emotional connections typically fade with time, the Empress explained. Yet Lyra responded as if she were truly seeing her father again. She stopped pacing suddenly. Vaxis was watching her closely during the ritual. I saw his expression change when the connection intensified. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. You think he noticed something unusual? I think we must accelerate our plans, she replied. The trade guild corruption evidence you delivered to Ambassador Chun was only the beginning. I had hoped to build our coalition slowly, carefully. But if Vaxis is already suspicious, we may not have that luxury. Over the next few weeks, a subtle but unmistakable shift occurred in the palace. Guards appeared more frequently along Ethan's regular routes. Palace staff who had begun to warm to him suddenly became distant again. Twice, he discovered his private quarters had been searched while he was with the princess. Yet his sessions with Lyra continued uninterrupted. If anything, the princess became even more attached to him, peppering him with questions not just about Earth, but about his own life and experiences. Did you have a father? She asked one afternoon as they sat in the palace gardens, watching butterflies from a dozen worlds flutter among exotic blossoms. Everyone has a father, Your Highness, Ethan replied with a smile. But did you know yours? She persisted. Was he nice? Did he teach you things? Ethan's smile faded slightly. Yes, I knew him. He was a good man, a mechanic who fixed airplanes on Earth. He taught me how to use tools, how to figure out why things weren't working properly. My father taught me things too, Lyra said softly. In the crystal, I mean. He showed me memories I didn't know I had, from when I was very small. She plucked a flower and twirled it between her fingers. He showed me that he used to look different sometimes, when it was just us as a family. His face had fur like yours, and he was less shiny. Ethan froze, unsure how to respond. The princess continued, seemingly unaware of his sudden tension. In the memory, he told me it was a secret, that he could only be himself with me and Mother. That someday I would understand. She looked up at Ethan with those violet eyes that seemed to see too much. I think I'm starting to understand now. Before Ethan could formulate a response, a shadow fell across them. He looked up to find Thelian standing there, his expression urgent. "Apologies for the interruption, Your Highness, but your mother requests Advisor Cole's presence immediately." Lyra pouted but didn't protest when her other attendants arrived to escort her to her afternoon lessons. As Ethan followed Thelian through the palace corridors, he noted the young Valkyrin's unusual tension. "What's happening?" he asked quietly. "Not here," Thelian murmured. "There are too many years." They didn't go to the Empress's usual study, but instead took a circuitous route through service corridors until they reached a small, unadorned chamber Ethan had never seen before. The Empress was waiting inside, along with Ambassador Chun of Earth, a petite, stern-faced woman who had spent decades fighting for human rights within the Concordat. "We have a problem," the Empress said without preamble as soon as the door sealed behind them. "The evidence of guild corruption has been traced back to the palace. Elder Vaxis has called for an investigation into unauthorized access to confidential guild records by the imperial household." Ambassador Chen nodded grimly. "He's cleverly framed it as a matter of proper procedure rather than an accusation against your Radiance directly, but the intent is clear. An investigation would give him legitimate access to palace security logs," the Empress continued, "including records of who entered which secure areas. It would lead him directly to you, Ethan, and from there, to whatever he suspects about the princess," Ethan finished. "What can we do?" "We've been preparing for something like this," Ambassador Chen said, activating a small holographic projector. "Just not so soon." The projector displayed a detailed map of the palace and surrounding governmental complex. Certain pathways were highlighted in blue. "These are security blind spots," the ambassador explained. "Areas where monitoring is minimal or can be temporarily disabled without raising alarms. We've been mapping them for years, just in case." "In case of what?" Ethan asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "In case we needed to extract someone important," Chen replied, her gaze flicking between Ethan and the Empress. "Originally, we were thinking of human diplomats if relations deteriorated. But now we're talking about the princess," Ethan said flatly. The Empress stepped forward. "Not extraction, protection. If Vaxis discovers Lyra's heritage, he will use it to disqualify her from succession. The next in line is his nephew's son. The imperial power would effectively pass to his control, and humanity's place in the Concordat would become even more precarious," Chen added. Ethan studied the map, noting the escape routes that led to the spaceport and diplomatic sector. "You want to be ready to move the princess off-world if necessary. As a last resort only," the Empress emphasized. "I would rather fight this battle politically if possible. But Vaxis has been consolidating power for years. If he makes a move against Lyra, it will come suddenly and with overwhelming force. I've arranged for an Earth diplomatic vessel to remain on standby," Chen said. "Officially, it's experiencing technical difficulties that require it to stay docked. In reality, it's ready to depart at a moment's notice." "And what about you?" Ethan asked the Empress. "Would you go with her?" A shadow passed across her face. "My duty is to the Concordat. If it comes to it, I would remain to fight Vaxis politically while Lyra is kept safe." She straightened her shoulders. "But we are not at that point yet. For now, we continue as normal while accelerating our efforts to build a coalition against Vaxis." But normal lasted less than a week. Ethan was awakened in the middle of the night by Thelian shaking him urgently. "Get up," the young Valkyrin hissed. "Now, we have to move." Ethan was instantly alert. "What's happened?" "Elder Vaxis has called an emergency session of the council. He's presenting evidence of genetic contamination in the Imperial line." Thelian's voice was tight with fear. "The Empress sent me to bring you to her immediately." Ethan dressed quickly, his mind racing. How did Vaxis get proof? "The medical records were secured." "Not the medical records," Thelian replied grimly. "The ancestral memory crystal." After the ceremony, he petitioned for access to study the unusual connection between the princess and her father's imprint. It was granted yesterday. They moved swiftly through darkened corridors, using the service pathways that were less heavily monitored. When they reached the imperial family's private wing, they found it in controlled chaos, attendants moving purposefully, packing essential items while royal guards stood at heightened alert. The Empress was in her study, giving rapid instructions to her most trusted advisors. When she saw Ethan, she dismissed the others with a gesture. Vaxis found something in the memory crystal, Ethan said as soon as they were alone. Something the Emperor didn't fully remove. A fragment of a personal memory, the Empress confirmed, her voice tight. A moment of Talon with his father, Lyra's grandfather, showing distinctly human characteristics. It was deeply buried, but Vaxis was specifically looking for such evidence. He's presenting it to the council now? Yes, and he has already deployed his personal guard to secure the palace against what he terms potential contamination risks. Her eyes flashed with cold fury. He means to take Lyra into protective custody, while her genetics are verified. Ethan felt sick. Once he has her, he'll either expose her heritage publicly or she will have an unfortunate accident, leaving his nephew's son as heir. The Empress's voice was flat. Either way, he wins. Then we implement the contingency plan, Ethan said. Get Lyra to the Earth ship. Yes. She moved to the hidden panel where the Emperor's private memory crystal was stored. But first, we need to preserve this. It contains the truth, not just about Lyra's heritage, but about Talon's accomplishments despite it. Evidence that human blood strengthened the imperial line rather than contaminated it. She carefully wrapped the glowing crystal and handed it to Ethan. Take this and the princess to Earth. Ambassador Chun is waiting at the ship. I've recorded testimony explaining everything. It will be released to all Concordat worlds once you're safely away. You're not coming, Ethan realized. I cannot abandon my people to Vaxis's xenophobic vision, she said firmly. If I flee, it validates his claims that humanity is a corrupting influence. I must stay and fight, show that I believe in the rightness of our cause. Before Ethan could argue further, Felion burst into the room. Vaxis's guards are in the main palace. They'll reach this wing in minutes. The Empress straightened. Then it's time. Bring Lyra. The princess was already dressed in simple clothing, her elaborate royal garments left behind. When she saw Ethan, she ran to him immediately. Are we going on an adventure? She asked, her eyes bright with excitement rather than fear. At her age, she couldn't fully comprehend the danger they were in. Yes, Your Highness, Ethan replied, kneeling to her level. A very important, secret adventure. But we have to be very quiet and follow Felion exactly, okay? She nodded solemnly, then turned to her mother. Aren't you coming too, mother? The Empress knelt and embraced her daughter tightly. Not this time, my star. I have important work to do here, but we'll see each other again soon. Her voice caught slightly on the last words, and Ethan saw the doubt in her eyes. Doubt that her promise could be kept. I'll protect her with my life, Ethan vowed quietly. I know you will. The Empress pressed something into his hand, a small device he recognized as an imperial override key, capable of bypassing most security systems in the palace. Now go. The Eastern Service Corridor leads to the diplomatic sector. Ambassador Chun has cleared your path as much as possible. With a final embrace for her daughter, the Empress stepped back. Be brave, my little star. Remember who you are, the daughter of Emperor Talon, heir to the Concordat, bridge between worlds. Lyra nodded, her small face suddenly serious beyond her years. I'll make you and Daddy proud. You already have, the Empress whispered. Then, with visible effort, she composed herself into the regal figure that the galaxy knew. Go now. Felion led them through a concealed door into a narrow passageway. As it closed behind them, Ethan caught one last glimpse of the Empress, standing tall and proud, ready to face what was coming. They moved as quickly as possible while still keeping Lyra comfortable, following the route they had planned. Felion went ahead at intersections, checking for guards, while Ethan carried the princess when she grew tired. They had almost reached the diplomatic sector when alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Harsh, pulsing sounds that made Lyra cover her ears. They've discovered she's missing, Felion said grimly. All exits will be sealed. Then we use this, Ethan said, producing the override key. They reached a security checkpoint that separated the palace proper from the diplomatic wing. 2 guards stood at attention, instantly alert at their approach. Halt, one commanded. No one is permitted to pass. Palace lockdown is in effect. Ethan stepped forward, holding up the override key. Imperial priority override. Step aside. The guards hesitated, their training to obey Imperial authority conflicting with the lockdown protocols. While they wavered, Felion moved with unexpected speed, delivering precise strikes that left both guards unconscious before they could raise an alarm. I didn't know you could do that, Ethan said, impressed. Felion gave a small, tight smile. There's a reason the Empress trusted me with this task. I was part of the Imperial Guard before being reassigned for expressing views too sympathetic to non-Valkyran species. They continued through the checkpoint, using the override key to deactivate the security barriers. The diplomatic sector was quieter, with fewer guards. Planetary sovereignty protocols limited Valkyran security presence here. They were approaching the Earth Embassy when a squad of guards appeared ahead, led by a tall figure Ethan recognized instantly. Elder Vaxis himself. Back, he hissed, pulling Lyra into a side corridor. But it was too late. They had been spotted. There, Vaxis called. The human has the princess. Apprehend him immediately. Guards rushed toward them from both directions. Felion pushed Ethan and Lyra behind him, drawing a small weapon. Get her to the embassy. I'll hold them as long as I can. Felion, go, the young Valkyran insisted. This is bigger than any of us. With a heavy heart, Ethan lifted Lyra into his arms and ran, hearing the sounds of energy weapons discharging behind them. He didn't look back, focusing only on the embassy entrance ahead. They burst through the doors, where Ambassador Chun was waiting with her security team. This way, she directed urgently, leading them through the embassy to a secured docking bay where a small, sleek ship waited. The Celestial Pathfinder is ready for immediate departure. As they boarded, Ethan looked back toward the palace that was now in visible lockdown, lights flashing and security forces mobilizing. He thought of the Empress facing Vaxis alone, of Felion sacrificing himself to buy them time. Will they be okay? Lyra asked, following his gaze. Your mother is very strong and very smart, Ethan told her, wishing he felt as confident as he tried to sound. She knows what she's doing. The ship's engines hummed to life as Ambassador Chun completed the launch sequence. We have diplomatic clearance to depart, she announced. Once we're in orbit, we'll make the jump to Earth space. As the ship rose from the docking bay, the palace receding beneath them, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. The princess of the Galactic Concordat, 1/4 human, heir to the imperial throne, and now a refugee, was in his care. And in the crystal he carried were the memories of her father, preserved to guide her when the time was right. Look, Lyra said suddenly, pointing at a view screen that showed the palace below. Mother is talking to everyone. Indeed, on all communication channels, the Empress's image had appeared, addressing not just the capital, but all worlds of the Concordat simultaneously. Though they couldn't hear the audio from their position, Ethan could guess what she was saying, revealing the truth about her husband's heritage, challenging Vaxis's xenophobia, appealing to the better nature of the Concordat citizens. It was a bold, desperate move, one that could either save her or condemn her, depending on how the people responded. The ship cleared the atmosphere, the capital city becoming a pattern of lights on the surface below. Ambassador Chun activated the faster-than-light drive, and the view of Valkyran Prime distorted as they prepared to jump. Will we ever come back? Lyra asked, her small hand finding Ethan's. He squeezed it gently. Yes, Your Highness. Someday. As the stars stretched into lines and the ship entered the FDL corridor, Ethan made a silent promise to the Emperor whose memories he carried and the Empress who had trusted him with her greatest treasure. Lyra would return. And when she did, she would be ready to lead the Concordat into a new era. one where humanity and Valkyrie stood as equals. 5 years passed on Earth, years during which Lyra grew from a child into a young woman who straddled two worlds. Living in a secluded compound provided by Earth's government, she continued her Valkyrie education while also immersing herself in human culture. Ethan remained by her side, evolving from advisor to something closer to a guardian or uncle. News from the Concordat was sporadic and often contradictory. The Empress had survived the initial confrontation with Vaxis, protected by popular support after her revelation. The Concordat had fractured, with some worlds remaining loyal to her while others aligned with Vaxis and his puppet candidate for the throne. Civil war had been avoided, but a cold stalemate had settled across the galaxy, with trade routes divided and diplomatic relations strained. Earth, once a minor player in galactic politics, now found itself in a pivotal position, home to the true heir of the imperial throne, and therefore a symbolic linchpin in the power struggle. Human status within the Concordat territories loyal to the Empress improved dramatically, while in Vaxis-controlled regions, humans faced increasing restrictions. Throughout it all, Lyra studied the memory crystal her father had left her, learning not just about her heritage, but about the complex politics and history of the empire she was born to rule. The crystal contained more than just memories. It held strategic insights, diplomatic secrets, and personal wisdom that the emperor had preserved for his daughter. On the morning of Lyra's 13th birthday, the age at which Valkyrie traditionally began formal preparation for adult responsibilities, a message arrived from deep space, heavily encrypted and routed through a dozen relay points to avoid detection. Ethan, Ambassador Chun, and the leaders of Earth's government gathered to view it with Lyra. When the message resolved into an image, a collective gasp filled the room. It was the Empress, though changed from the regal figure they remembered. Her face bore new lines of strain, and her once elaborate robes had been replaced with simpler attire. But her eyes still held the same fierce determination. "My daughter," she began, her voice carrying across light years. "If you are seeing this, then our loyal agents have successfully delivered my message. Today you begin the journey toward adulthood and the responsibilities that await you. It is time for the next phase of our plan." She leaned closer to the recording device. Vaxis grows desperate. His attempt to legitimize his puppet heir has failed to gain universal recognition. More worlds defect to our cause each cycle. He knows that as long as you live, his claim to control the imperial succession remains vulnerable. Her expression hardened. "Our intelligence suggests he is preparing a direct assault on Earth, an unprecedented violation of Concordat principles, but one he believes necessary to secure his position." Ambassador Chen inhaled sharply. "An attack on Earth? That would trigger a full-scale war, which is precisely what we must prevent," the Empress continued, as if anticipating the reaction. "Not through surrender, but through your return, Lyra. A return that will rally our supporters and demonstrate to all worlds that the true imperial line endures, stronger for its diverse heritage, not weakened by it." She outlined a daring plan. A network of loyal Concordat ships would create a secure corridor for Lyra's return to Valkyrie space. There, at a gathering of representatives from hundreds of worlds, she would undergo the rite of acknowledgement, a ceremony traditionally performed when an heir reached the age of preparation, confirming their genetic right to the throne. "But in your case," the Empress explained, "it will be more than a ritual. It will be a declaration that your human blood is not a flaw to be hidden but a strength to be celebrated. The future of the Concordat must be one of unity, not division." When the message ended, the room fell silent, each person contemplating the implications. It was Lyra who spoke first, her voice carrying the musical tones of her Valkyrie heritage, but with the directness that came from her years on Earth. "I will go," she said simply. "It's what my father would have wanted." Ethan studied her face, still young, but with an increasing resemblance to her mother in the set of her jaw and the clarity of her gaze. "It will be dangerous," he cautioned. "Vaxis will do everything possible to prevent this ceremony from taking place. Which is why I need you with me." she replied, turning to him. All of you, Earth and Valkyrin, working together, just as I am both. 2 months later, a fleet of ships converged at the edge of Earth's solar system, vessels from worlds loyal to the Empress, each contributing to the protective escort that would guide Lyra home. Ethan stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching as the young princess, dressed in a ceremonial gown that combined traditional Valkyrin elements with subtle Earth influences, prepared to address the captains of their escort. She looks so much like her mother, Ambassador Chun murmured, standing beside him. But when she speaks, I hear her father's pragmatism. And something else entirely her own, Ethan added. Something neither fully Valkyrin nor fully human. Lyra stepped forward, activating the communication system that would broadcast her image to every ship in their fleet. Despite her youth, she carried herself with a poise that commanded attention. Captains and crews of the loyal Concordat vessels, she began, her voice clear and steady. I thank you for your courage and your faith. Today we begin a journey not just back to Valkyrin Prime, but toward a new future for all our peoples. She paused, meeting the gaze of each captain visible on the view screens before her. My father believed that diversity brought strength, that the blending of different perspectives, different biologies, different ways of thinking was not a dilution but an enhancement. His vision was of a concordat where all species contributed their unique gifts to a greater whole. Her voice strengthened. I am living proof of that vision. In my veins flows both Valkyrin and human blood. In my mind reside the teachings of both cultures. And in my heart burns a determination to create the concordat my father dreamed of, one where no species is considered lesser, where collaboration replaces domination. The response was immediate, captains and crews from a dozen worlds signaling their support, their commitment. With a final nod of acknowledgement, Lyra ended the transmission and turned to Ethan. Was that appropriate? She asked quietly, suddenly sounding more like the young girl he had first taught about Earth customs than the heir to a galactic empire. It was perfect, he assured her, smiling. Your father would have been proud. The journey to Valkyrin space took 3 weeks, following a circuitous route to avoid detection by Vaxus's patrols. They received regular encrypted updates from the Empress, detailing the preparations for Lyra's arrival and the growing support for their cause. But as they approached the designated meeting point, a space station in neutral territory where representatives from hundreds of worlds had gathered for the ceremony, an urgent message came through. Vaxus knows. The Empress's voice was tense. He has dispatched his fleet to intercept you. You must alter course immediately. The captain of their vessel, a seasoned Valkyrin loyal to the Empress, turned to Ethan and Lyra. We have options, Your Highness. We can retreat to safe territory, or we can attempt to outrun Vaxus's forces to reach the station. Lyra considered for only a moment. If we retreat, Vaxus will claim victory, proof that I fear to face the right of acknowledgement. We continue as planned. The risk, the captain began, is necessary, Lyra finished firmly. Signal the fleet. Maximum speed to the station. We will make our stand there, where witnesses from across the Concordat can see the truth unfold. Their ships surged forward, pushing engines beyond recommended limits. Behind them, Vaxus's larger fleet gave chase, gradually closing the distance. It became a race against time. Could they reach the station and begin the ceremony before Vaxus's forces arrived to stop it? As the station came into view, a massive structure of interlocking rings spinning serenely in space, Ethan felt a surge of hope. They might just make it. But then long-range scanners detected another fleet approaching from the opposite direction. A blocking force Vaxus had positioned in anticipation of their route. We're trapped, Ambassador Chun said grimly, studying the tactical display. Vaxus's forces will reach us before we can dock with the station. Lyra stepped forward, her expression resolute. Then we bring the ceremony to them. She turned to the communications officer. Open a channel to all ships in the area. Ours, Vaxus's, and any observers. Maximum broadcast range. Surprised but obedient, the officer complied. Lyra straightened her shoulders and faced the camera. People of the Concordat, she began, her voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. I am Princess Lyra, daughter of Emperor Talon and Empress Selene, rightful heir to the imperial throne. I come to undergo the rite of acknowledgement, to confirm my genetic right to succession as tradition demands. She gestured to the ships closing in around them. Elder Vaxus seeks to prevent this ceremony because he fears what it will reveal, that my heritage, which includes human ancestry, is not a weakness but a source of unique strength. The Emperor, my father, carried human blood in his veins, as do I. This truth has been hidden for generations out of fear of prejudice. As she spoke, the enemy ships continued their approach, but more slowly now, their commanders clearly listening to her words, perhaps hesitating at this unexpected development. I will not hide this truth any longer, Lyra continued. Instead, I offer myself for the rite of acknowledgement here and now, before all witnesses. Let the ancestral crystal judge my worthiness. She lifted her hands, revealing the private memory crystal her father had left her, the one containing his true, unaltered memories. I carry with me my father's legacy, not the sanitized version presented to the Concordat, but his true self, human elements and all. Let this crystal and the official one at the station be compared, and let the truth be known at last. The crystal in her hands began to glow, responding to her touch and her words. As its light intensified, engulfing her in a nimbus of radiance, something unexpected happened. The station ahead of them also began to glow, a matching light emanating from its central chamber where the official ancestral crystal was housed. The crystals are resonating, whispered the Valkyrian captain in awe. This has never happened before. The light from both crystals stretched across the void of space, connecting in a brilliant bridge of energy. Within that light, a figure began to form, translucent, ghostly, but unmistakable. Emperor Talon, as he had truly been. Features showing both his Valkyrian and human heritage, unaltered by genetic modifications or political necessity. His voice, carried somehow through the connection between the crystals, echoed across all communication channels. My people, he said, his gaze seeming to encompass all the watching ships. You see me now as I truly was, a child of two worlds, stronger for the diversity in my blood. What you achieved under my guidance was not despite my human ancestry, but because of the unique perspective it gave me. The Spectral Emperor turned toward Vaxus's command ship. Vaxus, old friend, your fear of difference has blinded you to its value. The future of the Concordat lies not in genetic purity, but in the strength that comes from unity in diversity. Finally, he looked directly at Lyra, his expression softening with paternal pride. My daughter carries forward not just my bloodline, but my vision. She is the bridge between worlds that our galaxy needs. The rite of acknowledgement is complete. She is confirmed as my true heir, human blood and all. The light flared once more, then faded, leaving the assembled ships in stunned silence. On the tactical display, Ethan could see Vaxus's vessels had stopped their advance entirely, their commanders presumably awaiting new orders in light of this unprecedented event. After a long moment, a new transmission came through from the station. The Empress appeared on screen, her expression a mixture of triumph and relief. What you have witnessed today is truth unveiled, she declared. The rite has been completed in a manner none could have predicted, but all have seen. I call upon the commanders of all vessels to escort Princess Lyra safely to the station, where representatives of the Concordat worlds await to acknowledge her as rightful heir. To Ethan's amazement, ships from Vaxus's own fleet began breaking formation, moving to position themselves as honor guard rather than attacking force. The balance had shifted dramatically and irrevocably. Hours later, aboard the station, Lyra stood before an assembly of dignitaries from across the galaxy. The Empress stood at her side, their resemblance striking now that they were reunited. Ethan watched from nearby, his heart full with pride and a bittersweet awareness that his role in Lyra's life would soon be changing. The Empress stepped forward to address the gathering. Today marks a new beginning for the Concordat. For too long, we have allowed fear of difference to limit our potential. My husband, Emperor Talon, dreamed of a galaxy where all sentient species could contribute equally to our shared civilization. Today, we recommit ourselves to that vision. She gestured to where Elder Vaxus stood, notably separated from his former supporters. Even those who once opposed us are welcome to join in building this new future, provided they are willing to set aside old prejudices. Vaxus, his political power effectively broken by the day's events, could only incline his head in reluctant acknowledgement. The Empress continued, "As a symbol of this commitment, I am establishing a new council of interspecies cooperation, with representatives from all member worlds, regardless of technological development or population size. Earth will hold a seat equal to any other." She smiled at Ambassador Chun. "And to lead this council, we need someone who understands both Valkyran and human perspectives." She turned to Ethan, who blinked in surprise. "Ethan Cole, you who have served as guardian and guide to the heir of the Concordat, who have demonstrated loyalty not just to your own species, but to the greater good of all. Will you accept this responsibility?" Ethan stood frozen, overwhelmed by the unexpected honor. He looked to Lyra, who nodded encouragement, her eyes bright with the same trust she had shown him since that first day when she had pointed at him and said those fateful words. "He looks like Daddy." Words that had changed his life, and now, perhaps, the course of galactic history. "I accept, Your Radiance," Ethan replied, bowing deeply. "It would be my honor to serve the Concordat in this capacity." As the assembly erupted in applause, Lyra stepped forward to embrace him, whispering, "Thank you for bringing me home." Looking around at the diverse gathering, Valkyran nobles standing alongside representatives from dozens of species, including a growing human delegation, Ethan realized that home had taken on a new meaning. Not just Valkyran Prime or Earth, but the Concordat itself, reimagined as a true galactic family where differences were celebrated rather than suppressed. Later, as celebrations continued throughout the station, Ethan found a quiet moment with the Empress. "I've been wondering something," he said carefully. "That day when Lyra first saw me and said I looked like her father, was it truly coincidence? Or did you engineer our meeting, knowing what she might see?" The Empress's lips curved in a mysterious smile. "Perhaps the universe arranges such meetings according to its own wisdom, Ethan Cole. Or perhaps a mother knows exactly what her daughter needs to discover her true heritage." She touched the pendant at her throat. "Either way, the outcome has served us all well, has it not?" Before he could press further, Lyra joined them, her face alight with excitement and purpose. "Mother, Ethan, come quickly. The representatives from the outer systems want to discuss educational exchange programs. They're talking about a galactic university with campuses on multiple worlds." As they followed the enthusiastic young princess, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter in a palace corridor to the threshold of a new era for the Concordat. An era that would be shaped by a leader who embodied the very principle she championed, that the blending of different worlds created something stronger than either could be alone. And it had all begun with those simple words spoken by a child who saw truth more clearly than the adults around her. "He looks like Daddy." The Empress had frozen in that moment, fearing exposure of a carefully guarded secret. But in the end, that secret, once revealed, had not destroyed the imperial legacy but transformed it, opening the door to a future where no one would need to hide their true heritage again. As the gathering of dignitaries parted respectfully for Lyra, Ethan saw not just the princess or future empress she would one day become, but the bridge between worlds she already was. Human and Valkyran, Earth and the stars, past and future, all in balance, all in harmony. The janitor who had once kept his head down while pushing his cart through alien corridors now walked tall beside the heirs to a galactic civilization, reminding all who saw them that greatness could come from the most unexpected places, and that destiny sometimes spoke through the honest observations of a child. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, Don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.